Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
I woke up this morning perfect. Now, I know that sounds like I'm putting myself over, but I mean, yesterday at this time, I was sitting I've got a reclining chair in my TV room, and I sat down in it about 7:30 in the morning, and I couldn't get off that chair or out of that chair till about noon. My back was killing me so bad. I don't know if I slipped a disc, pinched a nerve, popped a muscle, I don't know. And it hurt so bad. I mean, it took my breath away. It was like getting kicked by a horse every time I tried to move.
Oh,
And then about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it started feeling a little bit better. So I stretched very carefully, some like DDP yoga shit, stretching out my back carefully, drinking lots of water, getting some electrolytes, element electrolytes, by the way, best of them. Pounding electrolytes, stretching mildly. We did the show last night, the reaction to WCW. And during the middle of that show, I started feeling pretty good.
wow.
But I was scared because yesterday morning, the night before last, I went to bed. I felt all right. Back was a little stiff. I woke up, I could barely walk. So I was really nervous about this morning. Went to bed immediately after our show last night. Again, hydrated with electrolytes. Of electrolytes, people. And I woke up this morning and it was like nothing ever happened. Like I'm going to the gym as soon as I'm done here. That's how good I feel.
Oh, good for you.
So I'm grateful. I'm absolutely grateful. I feel it's good. And you hear people talk about back pain and how bad it is. And if you've never had it, I experienced it for about 24 hours. But if someone that's living with chronic back pain can't get comfortable sitting up, can't get comfortable laying down. The only thing I could do yesterday that was a little bit of relief was standing and walking. If I was standing or walking, the pain went away. If I was sitting or whatever. So I have a lot of empathy for people who have chronic back issues because it's not like a bad shoulder or a bad knee. You can't work around it. You can't do fuck all if your back's bad. So much respect to those who are fighting chronic back.
Well, there's somebody else who's been a pain in your back. And you told me right before we went live here that you had a bone to pick. Just want to get it out of the way. So this is me pulling the Band-Aid. What's going on with you and Dave Meltzer today?
Again, just as grateful as I am to not wake up with any back pain this morning so that I could throw myself into the show with passion and fury and all the positive vibes that I can muster. I also feel pretty good about the fact that Dave Meltzer is getting, and his little midget sidekick, Brian Alvarez, are getting absolutely roasted, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. And it puts this weird smile on my face to know that every moment that goes by, with every breath that Dave Meltzer takes, he's becoming more and more transparent, and more people are seeing what a fraud he really is. And Dave likes to call and reference, anybody that has anything to say about the way he conducts his business or his coverage, likes to call them frauds and con men. If there is anybody on the periphery of the wrestling business, because Dave has never been in the wrestling business, he's just a goofy fan with a dirt sheet. But every breath he takes, more and more people are realizing just what a fraud he is and what a con man is by just being Dave Meltzer and putting shit out there that's not true, has an impact on people's families, that makes no sense whatsoever, and just makes him look dumber than a fucking bag of hair every time he does it. And I'm here for it. I'm here for every moment of it. And I encourage people, when you see dumb shit that Dave puts out there, and I'm encouraging people, flood the social medias, flood internet with it, flood X, Facebook. Let the world know what a fraud and a con man this guy is, and save your fellow wrestling fans $15 a month. Truly.
Yeah, they did just do a price increase. I think it's the first one in a long time. It's $15 now.
That's fucking crazy. Buy a roll of toilet paper, wipe your ass, flush it. You're ahead of the game.
I know that you don't consider him a credible news source. I do still value his opinion, but I have to admit, he did get that McAfee story this wrong. Is that what's got a burr under your saddle this morning?
No, that made me laugh.
Okay.
That just it just, again, it just exposes Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez for the complete fucking con men frauds that they really are. They spend so much time accusing other people of frauds and con men. When you talk about projection, love of God, this should be a psychology course following the mind of Dave Meltzer. It's just ridiculous. But I think it's funny. But it's just another example of how fucking wrong he can be. And he talks about he's got friends in WWE. Probably the lowest level people that can get a security pass to get in the door, perhaps. Or if they're people at the top, people that have serious stroke in WWE, they're feeding him bullshit to watch him churn and burn himself. I mean, it's been going on for years. It's hilarious, but he continues to try to convince people that he's got more friends in WWE than he has in AEW. Never do. It's fun. My idea of fun. I guess what happens when you live out in the middle of nowhere with me, my wife, and my dog. Little things that make me smile.
Well, listen, you had a lot to smile about this past weekend. A mutual friend of ours, Cyrus Fees, is a big part of what they're doing over at Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships or Championship Fighting. And I hooked you guys up, and you liked the idea so much, you actually went to check out a live event. Tell us what your experience was like seeing some bare knuckle up close from Triller TV.
First of all, shout out to Cyrus and Dave Feldman, who is the owner of Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships. Super guy, just down to earth, unpretentious, smart, and completely committed to Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships. I knew a little bit about Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships. Obviously, I'd heard about it. I think I may have come across a clip or two, but it was not really on my radar until you and I spoke, and I connected with Cyrus. And when I got there, met with everybody. Fighters are great. Met a lot of the fighters. Super, super classy group of people I dealt with. Chris Lytle was there. Got to hang out with him for a little bit. Super guy. Loved him. He was really interesting cat to talk to. Been around in the UFC and Bare Knuckle Fighting Champion. Just a smart, great athlete. Enjoyed it. Big personality as well. But I kept hearing about all this. Everybody kept telling me, man, I know you're excited about it. I know you're interested in it, but wait till you see it. And I'm not acknowledging that, of course. But I'm thinking, well, I've seen a lot of good fights. I'm sure I'll be happy and impressed, but come on, I've seen a lot of good shit.
Right.
I walked away going, okay, now I get it. It's really fun. It's a great, great fun. Here's some action shots from, man. The fighters are absolutely in great condition. They're very skilled. A lot of the look at that hook. Look at that. That right there. Look at where the left hand is.
Yep.
That to me is one of the most impressive boxing shots or fighting shots I've seen. Look at that left hook. It's absolutely perfect. But to really put it over, look at that left hand. Ain't no counter punch coming here, dude. You're going down. What an awesome shot. But it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to get to my next one. The women's fights were great. Some really interesting characters, man. I mean, the people that have gravitated to Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships are a different breed. I mean, there's no gloves on here. This is about as real as it can get.
Yes.
In terms of contact. And it's so much fun. Like, I love MMA. I enjoy watching it because, as a former amateur wrestler and Greco-Roman freestyle, that crazy stuff, I am interested in the ground game, but it tends to slow it down a little bit. And unless you're a fan of, jiu-jitsu in particular and like the submission style, it can get a little slow for the average viewer. Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships, man, they bring that bell and it's go time. It's fast. Again, excellent techniques in the fighters that I saw. And I can't wait for the next one. The next one happens to be in Sturgis, by the way, in August.
What?
During the Sturgis rally. I kid you not. And I was so disappointed because when I talked to Cyrus right after you hooked me up with him, he said, well, we've got an event in Fort Lauderdale, and we've got one in Sturgis. We'd really like you to come to the one in Sturgis. Now, that just happens to be my anniversary, and Mrs. B and I are taking a trip up to northern Montana to hang out for a week by ourselves. And I said, oh man, I'm going to ask my wife if she wouldn't mind going to Sturgis instead, which I knew is the words were coming out of my mouth. I'm thinking, oh, she's going to give me that look. She's not even going to say no. She's just going to look at me in this weird, subtle way.
Yep.
With that beautiful face of hers and those gorgeous blue eyes and mere smile. But behind those eyes, she's thinking, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. We are not going to Sturgis. So I said, we can't make Sturgis, but I did go to Fort Lauderdale, and the next one after Sturgis, I think they're going to be in Salt Lake City, and I'm going to definitely be at that one. That's a drive. I'll drive 8 hours to see people fight all day long, especially good. So yeah, shout out to Bare Knuckle Fighting Champion. Check them out on YouTube. Just Google Bare Knuckle Fighting Champion, BKFC. A lot of great action.
You can catch all their events on Triller TV, and Conor McGregor is a part of the ownership team now. So big things are coming for those guys. I've heard a lot about them from Mike Weber for a long, long time. You mentioned Mrs. B, and I had this thought yesterday watching as we watched the last episode of Who Killed WCW, and I didn't say anything during our live show. I guess I just forgot to mention it. But we got to see old photos of you and Mrs. B, and then a current day interview with Mrs. B. And I was like, boy, she made a deal with the devil. That woman has aged like wine. She is somehow more attractive now than she was back then. What are y'all doing out there? Y'all drinking the blood of young children, or what's going on?
No, man. I mean, first of all, she's just blessed genetically. But a lot of it has to do with the way we eat.
She is, it's working, man. Whatever she's doing, y'all need to keep that up, because I was like, man, look at her. How is that possible? But it was.
Well, first of all, it's kind of unfair. Like she was born in 61. So what is she going to be? 63 in July?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she'll be 63 or on the 4th of July, actually. But when I first met Lori, she was 21, but she looked like she was 14.
Oh, I see.
Sonny Ono will tell you a story. The first time Sonny Ono and his wife, Julie, they came up to Minneapolis right after I first started dating Lori. And we met for dinner or drink, whatever it was. And it was fine. Everybody got along really well. It was a fun night. Sonny called me the next day. He said, Eric, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? Because that girl you were with last night, is she legal? Are you going to go to jail? So she just, again, genetically, she's been blessed. But I think because she works out so hard, she watches her diet, she pays attention to what she eats. That only helps it along.
Well, we're hoping that we can help you out a little bit, because I know you got to keep up with her. And that means you got to be on your A game. And of course, I'm talking about Smooth Sack Summer. It's finally officially upon us. And we want to make sure that you're groomed from bum to pubes, thanks to our friends at Manscaped. This can be the smoothest season yet. The Performance Package 5.0 is all you need. It's the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool, but still look hot. The 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped already know. And now you can get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use our code 83weeks. Summertime and the trimming's easy, thanks to Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. Every man knows how scary it can get when you're going for that close shave below the belt, but not anymore. The Lawnmower 5.0 can hook you up. It's the star of the show. It's in this bundle, and it's their 5th generation trimmer, and it just keeps getting better every time. Now it's got 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads. A standard one to take a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. It's also got a couple of LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones. Jeff Jarrett says that's a game changer for him. They've even got 3 length setting combs. And did I mention it's waterproof? You can shave your wiener at the beach like JR, or shave it at the lake like me, or just waffle stomp it down the drain like Dave Silva. The Manscaped liquid formulations are where it's really at. The Crop Soother aftershave lotion and the Crop Preserver anti-chafing ball deodorant. Silva used to have to sleep on the couch because his nuts stank so bad. But now, thanks to Manscaped, he's getting a good night's sleep. You can too when you're rocking these new Manscaped boxers. It's a free gift that's included inside the Shed travel bag. JR is taking his weed vape coast to coast in that and has for years. So it's multiple purposes, shall we say. They've even got a brand new buff bundle, and that's going to have your silicone scrubber and your body wash. So dip your nasty ass loofah in the trash can. We're done with that. We can do better. Manscaped can even hook you up. How about 20% off with free shipping when you use our code 83weeks at manscaped.com? That's right, 20% off plus free shipping. Use our code 83weeks at manscaped.com. It's smooth sack summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. Now, Eric, we have done 4 episodes on Who Killed WCW. We were going live after each and every episode at 83weeks.com. And most recently, we had Dave Penzer join us. And there's been a lot of chatter, and I think we'll keep that conversation going in the coming weeks. If you haven't already, go check us out at 83weeks.com. It's not going to be on the RSS feed. It's exclusive to YouTube at 83weeks.com. It's totally free. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications bell. Just so you guys know, we've got feelers in the line on the line right now with Booker T, Stu Snyder, and a whole bunch of other folks that maybe you didn't think you'd hear from about the WCW conversation. And we're going to do our best to get to the bottom of it. And it's all happening right now on our YouTube at 83weeks.com. But not just the WCW conversation, Eric, because I can't believe you've agreed to do this again. But on Sunday night, very late this Sunday night, you and I are going to be live right after Forbidden Door. Now, you loved last year's Forbidden Door match between Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. You got to see that with some of our supporters from our adfreeshows.com initiative. We were hanging out at Dave & Buster's and catching some of the action. And this year, we're doing a live reaction for free on YouTube, 83weeks.com. It's a joint idea here, Eric. It's not WCW in New Japan. It's AEW in New Japan. What are you expecting this weekend live on pay-per-view from New York?
Great athleticism. Probably a great example of what's technically possible, physical perspective inside of the ring. Athletes are getting bigger, faster, stronger, and just better in every sport. And the same is true in professional wrestling. So we'll see a lot of that, probably buckets of blood. We'll see very little in-ring story. The only story that will exist will be in the imaginations of the minds of the diehard AEW fans, because a lot of the action that people enjoy seeing is so nonsensical. It's hard to suspend any disbelief. You're simply watching an exhibition of athleticism. It's much like, like of all the Olympic sports that I like to watch, I do like to watch Olympic wrestling, Olympic boxing. I do like to watch, but other than those two, for me, it's floor gymnastics, floor exercises in particular. I'm just amazed what people are able to train the human body to accomplish. It's just mind-boggling. And I think and that same feeling is true within some of the matches in AEW. It's just amazing to me that the athletes have been able to train their bodies to perform and execute some of these moves. But that's all it is. It's an exhibition. It's much like a gymnastics floor exercise. And to that extent, while it checks the box of, holy crap, I can't believe people are able to do that, which is, it's part of human nature, right? Certainly mine. But I can't get emotionally invested in any way, shape, or form. There's no sense of suspending any disbelief and allowing your emotions to kind of take over your enjoyment of the process and what you're watching. It's just an exhibition of really talented athleticism with zero relevance to story, in my opinion. Now, you get these Kool-Aid drinking fucking AEW nerds that Yeah, but they have history back to Ring of Honor. It's like, fuck you. I mean, what are we going to go back to Adam and Eve? Start debating the Apple issue? These guys have history. The story needs to have a beginning and a middle and an end and plot points. And there has to be beats within that story that are designed to create emotion and to create drama beyond this is awesome. Like a fucking group of trained baby seals. But look, I like to watch the athletic part of it too. It's just not a business model. It's a fantasy camp.
Well, I, for one, am looking forward to the AEW pay-per-view. I feel like they always over-deliver on pay-per-view. If you're looking for great matches, they're going to have it in heaping servings this weekend. I do want to ask you about story, because I know you're big on story, and there's a story that has perhaps just fallen into AEW's lap. I'm talking about what went super viral last weekend. I mean, Saturday and Sunday and even into Monday, it's all anybody was really talking about. The unbelievable conversation, I struggle to even call it a promo, that Jeff Jarrett had with a camera, where he just laid out what being in the Owen tournament meant to him. He, of course, is the only competitor in the tournament who actually knew Owen, and he got emotional. And about 90 seconds of it aired on television. But Tony Khan made the call to post the entire unedited and uncut, uncensored, over 9-minute conversation that Jeff had, just pouring his heart out, talking about Owen and what this tournament meant to him. And my takeaway is, man, they've got an opportunity to do something really, really special here. And anyone who was critical of the announcement that Jeff Jarrett was included with all of these young whippersnapper, chart busting 7-star match performers, man, they got quiet all of a sudden, because this story,
the chart busting 7-star performers that can't draw a dime. AEW were the best wrestle, but they still can't draw money. Yeah. And for anybody, I'm sorry to jump in. This gets me fucking hot. This is just an example. To think that, Jeff Jarrett, for whatever reason, doesn't belong with those young whippersnappers that can't draw a dime. The fact that interview was so good is because it points to exactly what I was talking about moments ago. It's the emotion of that is created within professional wrestling business that is the most crucial element. And for anybody to not recognize that and suggest that because Jeff is older, by the way, he could probably still outwork it in a traditional sense of the word in the wrestling industry, in terms of telling a story and executing physical moves inside of the ring that help amplify or continue a story, and has the requisite psychology to do so. I would imagine he can out wrestle anybody on that fucking roster, with the exception of maybe Daniel Bryan when he was in WWE, or Bryan Danielson, whatever. Now all I'm seeing is, super hardcore Japanese slap fest out of him. Whatever. That's what he wants to do. That's what he wants to do. But don't talk about we're the best wrestle and exclude Jeff Jarrett from the conversation because he's older than a bunch of punks that couldn't draw flies if you roll them in horse shit. Those are the people that are critical of Jeff Jarrett. The fact that Jeff can still draw money and probably has forgotten more about creating emotion within the body of a wrestling match than 90% of the roster at AEW will ever learn, and however long their careers may last. It shit pisses me.
well, sorry, Jeff, I tried. Eric kiboshed it, but we tried.
What? No, what did I kibosh? I'm supporting Jeff here.
Yeah, but you did it in a way where they're definitely not going to do fuck all with him now. So, I mean, Jeff Jarrett is one of the MVPs of AEW, and not that long ago, somebody posted a graphic. It was last year, but they posted a graphic saying, hey, did you know that Jeff Jarrett has had more matches on TV and they rattled off all kinds of top stars in AEW. He didn't have another match on TV after that for quite a while.
So you're saying the fact that I put him over on this podcast vehemently?
Yeah, that's going to hurt him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you shitting me?
No.
Is Tony Khan that much of a punk Is he going to allow himself to make a business decision based on the opinion of one person?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think anybody expected that promo to connect the way it did.
Of course not, because they didn't have a fucking idea how to create emotion. So it's going to be a surprise.
So it caught everybody off guard, and I was trying to get a little whisper campaign going. I mean, listen, I know they're not going to give him a title shot at Wembley. I would love to see that, but I don't think they're going to do that. But are you telling me there's a better visual in wrestling that we could look forward to than him in the center of the ring with all the ticker tape holding up a trophy with Athena, Oj, and Martha and Jeff's family in Calgary? I mean, that's a movie, man. Like that's
emotion.
That should happen. That should absolutely happen. And if it doesn't,
done well, Conrad, and they should hire you and Jeff to work on booking it. Keep Tony Khan away from that shit, or anybody else that's near Tony Khan. Let Jeff book it, and watch what happens. They'll create more, and they'll create so much emotion, and there'll be such a positive reaction because it will be done well, and it is emotion, and it's real story, and those emotions are real. That transmits to the audience, and if done properly, and I'm sure Jeff could figure it out really, really well, that will make people forget about all the stupid shit that's been going on in AEW for the last 2 years. I mean, that's a great thing about the wrestling business, any business really, is if you can find that one thing to help you turn around your perception. And it's hard, especially when you've been digging a hole as deep as AEW's been digging the last 2.5 or 3 years. It's hard, but when you do it, it's like time heals all wounds.
Right.
People will move on. They'll forget. It's when you're constantly doing dumb shit every single week and not satisfying the audience because you don't know how to satisfy the audience that people get down on you. But if they made this move and they executed it well and they created the emotion, my God, I'd become a fan again. As cynical as I have become about AEW for valid reasons, but it can turn it around. So Tony, just because I'm putting it over is no reason for you not to take advantage of it. Don't be such a pussy. Come on, man up. Do the right thing.
And creatively, Jeff could still, he could have a little help getting there to win the tournament. And then he gives the person who helped him the shot at Wembley or something. They could find a way to creatively do it. But man, we got to have that. I want that visual of Jeff holding that cup with Owen's family and his own family. And man, imagine they go off the air and that's the last visual we see in Calgary. Like that's a real moment in time for professional wrestling, for longtime, Hart family fans and longtime Jeff Jarrett fans, AEW fans, WWE fans. I mean, that's just when it's real. And I think that's the reason I struggle to even call it a promo, because I understand, that the real life Jeff Jarrett knew the real life Owen Hart. And sometimes we get caught up in character stuff, but that didn't feel like character stuff because it wasn't. That was real life. And we as wrestling fans, myself, I can speak for myself. I gravitate to the stuff where I'm like, well, that's real. Like, okay, I know what wrestling is. Yeah. But now this is real. And they have a moment to do an opportunity to do something really special about a month from now in Calgary. And I really, really hope they do.
You want to, should we place bets? Oh, no. I'm not doing a bet. I'm not. Look at you. Your eyes get all big. Your mouth opened up like a fucking cave. I get to shave his head again.
Yeah.
Yay.
It does happen pretty regular. Hey, listen, I got to bring up something else. I should mention, we are eventually going to watch King of the Ring 1998. Eric has seen clips.
What we were here for.
We've seen clips before, but Eric has never actually watched the full match for the Hell in a Cell, and we're going to do that. So if you haven't already, I want you to go to your Peacock, pull your Peacock out, get that rascal going, type in King of the Ring, and you want to go to season 6 of King of the Ring. That's 1998, of course.
King of the Ring. Doing that too?
No. You got a link. And it's in your email from yesterday. So you worry about finding a link. It was emailed to you yesterday.
I hate when this happens because I'm so bad at this shit.
Dave Silva will copy paste it here in the private chat. But here's what I wanted to bring up to you. Before we talk about King of the Ring, season 6, episode 1 on Peacock, and before you go to 1 hour, 8 minutes and 32 seconds, I wanted to ask you about Vince Russo. And I know you've talked to death about Vince Russo for the last 4 weeks, but I did something that, well, some of our hardcore listeners here on 83 Weeks, they weren't too happy with me about. I at least had a conversation with Vince. Now, I haven't had the negative experiences with Vince that you have. So growing up in Alabama, I just treat people how they treat me. And he's always been great to me, and I've reciprocated in kind. And I bring this up because we talked about episode 3 of Who Killed WCW. And through that process, one of the things that he said was that, hey man, I'm not hiding anything. I'm not running from any confrontation. You can hook me up, Conrad, to a lie detector and ask me anything you want. And of course, my wheels start going and I'm like, yes, I accept. I'll do that. What do you think of the idea of Vince offering me to hook him up to a lie detector test?
Here's the problem with guys like Vince Russo that believe his own lies. I absolutely believe that Russo believes his own bullshit. I've said that for years. That's one of the things that makes him so dangerous. And one of the reasons I don't trust him is because he is charming as fuck and he can convince you whatever he wants to convince you of because he can convince himself of that. There's nothing Vince Russo can say in any way. You could hook him up to the fucking space station. I don't care. There's nothing that anybody can say that will convince me that Vince Russo is anything other than what he is. And we talked a little bit about this last night. My issue with, I've got a lot of issues, but they're relatively minor with regard to Russo. But if I don't trust someone, I can't work with them. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to be seen in the same room with them. I don't want to share a stage with them. I don't want to lend any degree of credibility or even conversation. I may not have any credibility left to give. That's okay. I can give a fuck. But I don't want to help draw attention to someone that I know is not trustworthy. And he's not. Talked about this last night a little bit. For me, it comes down to Bash at the Beach.
Hang on that note.
I'm sitting in a fucking trailer with Hulk Hogan, Vince Russo, me, and a phone with Brad Siegel on the other end. And Vince and I had been going back and forth all week long. My father had just passed away a few days earlier. I was in Minneapolis. I wasn't able to be in Atlanta. I was conducting my business over the phone with Hulk, with Russo, with Brad Siegel. Hulk and I knew what we wanted to do. Russo had been working all week with his own plan of what he wanted to do. We got to Bash at the Beach. It came to a head. I'm going to speed this up because we've already covered it. It came to a head. It forced Vince Russo, myself, and Hulk to get on the phone with Brad Siegel, and Brad Siegel got to make the vote. He got to break the tie. So I wanted to do one thing. I wanted to do another thing. Brad Siegel was the tiebreaker. So we called Brad to break the tie. Brad broke the tie. And we went about doing, we, meaning Hulk and I, and the rest of the team, went about executing our plan, or at least our portion of that plan. And once we left the building, which was a part of the plan that was going to set up Hulk Hogan's return in October at Halloween Havoc, to challenge for the world title. Once we left the building, Vince Russo automatically went back to his original plan, despite the fact that Brad Siegel, Eric Bischoff, and Hulk Hogan agreed on that phone call to move forward with the Bischoff-Hogan plan. Now, I'm going to leave a crack in the door open. And I suggest that perhaps, especially after seeing Brad kind of slime around on camera for the last couple of weeks, and I don't have anything against Brad, but he was a little slippery during his interviews. A little is being kind. I'll leave a little bit of possibility open that after Hulk and I left that conference call, either Brad circled back to Vince or Vince circled back to Brad, and somehow one of the other convinced the other that once Eric and Hogan leave, we're going to go ahead with our plan. It's the only thing I can think of. It's one of two things. There's no gray area. There's no reason to confuse it with a bunch of extraneous bullshit that doesn't fucking matter. You were in that room with Hogan, with me, with Brad. We agreed on one thing. You motherfucker did another. That's great. Go into business for yourself. Just don't ever expect to do business with me again. You can fight with me. You can argue. You can throw fucking furniture at me. I could care less. And when it's over, we'll shake hands and we'll go about our business. And we may even go have a beer after. But if you do something is, my opinion, is dishonest and deceitful, whether Brad circled back to Vince or Vince circled back to Brad, if you participate in that and you're not honest and direct with me, fuck you. We're done. And your name goes on a list it'll never come off of. And Vince Russo's name is at the top of that list. So yeah, you hook him up to a lie detector, you put a fucking gun in his mouth. I could care less what you do. It doesn't matter to me because it ain't gonna change anything.
So now that we know how you feel about that, I do have a natural follow-up to that. If you felt so strongly, why and how were you able to work with him in TNA? Because it's not like the story ended in 2000. You guys worked together 10 years later. How?
I gave him another chance. I made the mistake. I knew better, but I wanted to be a team player. I wanted, Hulk was interested in doing the deal. He wasn't going to go unless I went with him. I wasn't really interested in going to TNA because I just wasn't. I didn't need money at the time. I was making more money than I ever had in my life outside of wrestling. Didn't need to go back to wrestling, but it was the opportunity was interesting. Hulk wanted to go. Hulk and I were pretty close. We had a lot of other business opportunities together that would have benefited from the exposure. And I convinced myself to, number one, give and forget. Well, forgive, not forget. And number two, I really wanted to try to be a team player. And I set myself up contractually where it didn't matter what Vince Russo did. The only thing I was interested in was the Hulk Hogan storyline and Hulk Hogan's participation in TNA. What he did outside of that, just I could care less. It wasn't my interest. It wasn't my job. I didn't want it to be. So it was me convincing myself to give, number one, combined with the fact that I wanted to be a team player, and it was a decent opportunity that could have provided momentum for some of the other things that we were doing. Plus, it was an opportunity. I brought Jason Hervey into it. Jason Hervey wasn't originally part of the deal. The original deal that was on the table was, it was because Hulk forced it, not because I wanted it, but I was there to oversee the Hulk Hogan participation in creative. Like I said, nothing else mattered to me, but I leveraged that because Jason Hervey and I were working so closely on other things outside of wrestling. And I'm the kind of person, if you're my business partner and we have a deal where, we're going to both work for this company and it's 50-50 and we're going to shake hands. I at that point, anything that I do, my business partner is going to be involved in, regardless of whether Jason was able to contribute or not. And the fact is, Jason contributed a lot, brought a lot to the table behind the scenes from a production perspective. And I was able to leverage Jason Hervey into the deal. So overall, it felt like the right thing to do for me. I don't regret it because I do have some fond memories of TNA, particularly having the opportunity to work with my son, having the opportunity to work with some of the talent there that I had never worked with, like AJ Styles and Frankie Kazarian and Chris Daniels, and a lot of people that I still consider friends that I was able to work with in TNA. I don't regret it, but yeah, that was the last time I'll make any concession for Vince Russo.
Go out of your way, if you haven't already, to check us out at adfreeshows.com. We went live last week and let all of our supporters ask Vince Russo questions. We did it a few days prior with Violent J, and we do it every month with Lex Luger, on a weekly basis with Kevin Sullivan, every month with David Crockett, every Saturday with Blue Meanie, and of course every Monday with either Nick Patrick or Mike Chioda. We are your home for all things bonus content and live interactive Q&As. You're on camera, they're on camera. We're watching old wrestling together. And you can find over 100,000 hours of bonus content, including every single StarCast stage show and panel discussion we've ever done at adfreeshows.com. Now, of course, today we're going to be watching King of the Ring 1998. We want you to watch along with us on your Peacock network. That is season 6, episode 1. And we're going to start at 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds. That's 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds. But before we do that, I just want to be honest about what my summer has been like here in North Alabama. It's as if Satan himself is breathing on me. It is blistering hot. Yesterday, it was 99 degrees. The heat index was over 110. And when it's that hot after a long day, a lot of us, man, we just want to take a shower and relax. But if you're looking for an invigorating shower, can I recommend Cremo's men's body wash? You know, someone recently asked me if I was wearing a new cologne, but it's not. It's my new body wash from Cremo. It's time to elevate and enhance your hygiene routine with this Cremo body wash. It's going to combine a rich lathering and hydrating formula with meticulously balanced and multi-layered fragrances for what I believe is just a superior shower experience. Cremo's new men's body wash scent makes a regular shower feel like a luxury experience. This bourbon vanilla body wash invigorates the senses with bold distiller spices, perfectly balanced with notes of rich Madagascar vanilla and aged oak to create a shower experience that'll meet even the highest of standards. And I used this just a couple of days ago. I was out of the house by 7 o'clock. I wasn't home until after 7 that night. I was still smelling and feeling pretty damn good, man. Cremo works with master perfumers to make sure that every Cremo body wash scent is meticulously blended and refined. And their hard work definitely shows. I mean, every wash, it smells like I've got a high-end cologne on. I'm a big believer in this product, and I have to admit, I wasn't so sure about it at first. But as soon as I stepped out of the shower and I was getting ready to leave for the office, boy, the wife noticed and said, "Hey, what is that?" Man, I know what to do. Come on. It also relaxes you after a long day. The scents are awesome. You're going to feel better. You're going to get comments about it. And if you're a guy, man, is there anything better than getting a compliment from somebody, out in public? "Oh, you smell nice." Come on now. See what makes Cremo different from other body washes. It's got a distinct layered scent. It's going to evolve actually as you're washing, getting you clean and making you smell great at the same time. Cremo also has a wide range of other grooming products for men. You can get things like shaving cream and beard oil and shampoo, and it's all it's all available in a variety of distinct masculine scents. So you don't have to worry about, well, you want to smell like a man and you will. Let me just say that. I'm a big believer in this product. I know Eric is too. You can find Cremo's men's body wash in its new distinctive bourbon vanilla scent at Walmart or walmart.com. Once again, you can find Cremo, that's Cremo, and I like their distinctive bourbon vanilla scent. It's available at Walmart, man, or go to walmart.com. Once again, that's Walmart or walmart.com. Eric, it's the real deal. What's Mrs. B think when you step out of the shower smelling like this, man?
It's R-rated. I won't go into it. but we get to sample a lot of stuff here, right? Because we'll get advertisers that will send us product to sample to see if we want to endorse it. And I love that because I don't like endorsing things that I have not used myself or believe in. You get shower gel and it's like, oh, okay, how good can it be? But immediately when you put this stuff in your hands, it feels different. It has it's creamy, which is probably where the name came from. When you're using it, it feels different than most soaps. And the smell is outstanding. It's very effective. And yeah, my junk is clean as a whistle.
And it's easy to get, man. Go to Walmart or pick it up at walmart.com. That's Cremo, Cremo, at Walmart or walmart.com. So, Eric, here we are, man. We're finally going to do it. We're going to watch a little bit of old school wrestling from way back when. This is from King of the Ring, 1998. And again, we're starting at 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds. They call it season 6, episode 1 over on Peacock. Are you locked and loaded and ready to go, Eric?
I'm within a click.
We're getting closer.
I'm at 108.27. Where do I need to be? 38?
1 hour, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds. No, hang on. Are you at the link that Silva sent you?
No, I couldn't get on. I'm at King of the Ring, season 6, episode 1, 1 hour, 8 minutes, 37 seconds.
You did this on Peacock by yourself?
Fuck yeah. That whole high-tech redneck bullshit is just a...
I'm so proud of you. All right, Eric, I'm at 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds. I'll count us down. And then when I press play, we'll press play. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play. And we see Paul Bearer walking to the ring right now. He's going to be doing a promo that's going to set up the main event. Now, Eric, you probably don't know this, but the story was that if Kane didn't defeat Austin in the main event of this match, he would have to set himself on fire. So there's some real stakes here. We're setting dudes on freaking fire here.
Yeah, it's summer. Is this summertime too, right?
Yes, it is.
It's barbecue season.
Well, literally. We're in Pittsburgh. It's June 28th. So as folks are listening to this is the exact anniversary. I remember watching this. My family lived on Pine Needle Trace at the top of the mountain here in Gunnersville, Alabama. And my dad had a business, I wouldn't say partner, but a business associate in from out of town visiting him. So the adults were in the kitchen having some drinks and fellowshipping, telling some stories. And I got the big screen. Dad let me put the pay-per-view on the big screen downstairs. And I could not believe what we're about to see. But believe it or not, the Mick Foley, King of the Ring, Hell in a Cell, that's not actually the main event. There's another match after that, and that's what Paul Bearer is here to discuss. Believe it or not, it's a first blood match with Paul Bearer and Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kane. Now, of course, Paul Bearer is just in the corner of Kane, but the idea of you, as you look at that image there, Eric, we're doing a first blood match with a guy who's wearing a red mask. This is a challenge. I mean, goodness gracious, what are we thinking?
Well, I think Kane has a decided advantage.
You think?
It's smart. Why would he agree to something without giving himself a decided advantage? And I'm sure when the idea was put on the table of Kane, you want to do a first blood match, and Kane's probably thinking in the back of his mind, sure, fuck yeah, I'll do that because you're not going to be able to see if I'm bleeding anyway, bitch. So bring it on. And that's probably what he was thinking.
King of the Ring is going to get a thumbs up from Dave Meltzer and a lot of his readers in the Wrestling Observer because of the last 3 matches. And what's interesting to note here is behind the scenes, Austin had been in the hospital with a staph infection in his elbow. But the business is so hot. I mean, they've just finally beat Nitro in the ratings in April. We're riding that momentum here. Things are getting bananas. And we're only like, as this match is happening, we're about 8 days away from Goldberg in the Georgia Dome winning the big gold belt. This is peak Monday Night Wars, and there's zero chance that Austin's going to miss this one. The building actually sold out more than a week in advance. There's 17,087 human beings in the building. 15,505 of those were paying the all-time city gate record of $539,660. They did nearly another $150,000 in merchandise. And this is the era where I first started to see in the Observer and the Torch what they called a per head. So you would take a look at how much merch we sold and then divide that by the number of tickets we sold and say, okay, this is about how much per head we're making on merch. And I know that was a metric that was used for a long time, but I almost never hear about it anymore. Why do you think that is, Eric?
And there's very little reporting on live events anymore. You know, that's another thing that used to exist quite often, is that people that covered wrestling not only covered what happened on television, but they also covered the details. Not the details, not the storyline, not necessarily the action, but reported on the business that was conducted at live events that were not televised, including merchandise, reports on attendance, and that seems to have gone by the wayside. At least I don't see it. If it's reported, I don't know where, and I don't spend a lot of time looking for it either. But I just think that the focus has gone so much towards the television side of things, whether it's rating and revenue and TV contracts and all that, that very little attention is paid to live events side of the business. Part of that is, of course, because the AEW is not even in the live events side of the business. They're simply producing a television show, while WWE is still legitimately touring. And maybe that's why, I don't know. But I'm surprised that we're not hearing about merchandise. You know, we see a lot of Brandon Thurston, by the way, think of the world of Brandon Thurston and his team over at WrestleNomics. They do a thorough incredible job of reporting information. And they cover merchandise sales, but they seem to do it more like on a quarterly basis in terms of who's doing what, what's the most popular. But you don't hear much about merchandise sales, WWE live tour business, which is interesting. I find it interesting because it really is a leading indicator. If you can watch your merchandise sales go from, let's call it $10 a head average, which would be considered back in 98 a healthy average, not fantastic, but healthy. But if you can move that from $10 to $11.50 over the course of 3 months, it's an indicator that something's going well. And you have to watch those indicators on a regular basis. Not only television ratings and quarter hours, that data can be important if it's used carefully and properly. But if you take minute by minute ratings, quarter hour ratings that have obviously these are the show, and you take that data and then you interface it or lay it over the top of some of the data that you're getting for your live event tours, and merchandise sales is one of the best barometers aside from actual ticket sales that you can have. And it also allows you to zero in on certain talents and see if their merch is moving. And if you see that merch is moving, that should be an indication that you should give it a little more time. We build up a little more because you give the audience what the audience wants. And the audience tells you what the fuck they want if you have the ability and the understanding to listen to them. Well, you just throw shit up against the wall and see what happens. One or the other.
I wonder if the merch sales, and the reason it's not as prevalent as it used to be, perhaps, is because of the ease of access. You know, back in the day, if you wanted WWE merch, you had to go to a live event to get it, or you had to mail in a check, you know, after you saw something in a catalog. And now, of course, man, we can just, you know, find something on our phone, click 2 buttons, and boom, it's on our door in a couple of days. So maybe just the process of buying merch is just a lot different now.
That's possible. Makes sense.
We should mention that we are watching an unannounced match here. It was added at the very last minute. It's the New Age Outlaws, who were over like Rover. I mean, the rap that Road Dogg would do on the way to the ring was incredible, the response he would get. And they're going to be taking on the new Midnight Express. So this is Bodacious Bob and Bombastic Bart, or whatever you want to call it. It's Bob Holly and Bart Gunn. And they're put together here as a tag team, and they're given Jim Cornette as a manager. No disrespect to either one of those performers. I think a lot of them, but, well, they're not Bobby Eaton. And I don't think anybody would argue that. The match itself goes 9 minutes and 54 seconds. This is when we're at least kind of half-assing our way through an NWA angle, where we're having some NWA representation with the new Midnight Express here. We'd get the Rock and Roll Express out here. We would even see Jeff Jarrett, and we would proclaim that he's the new North American NWA champion. But it was just a failed experiment. And there's been a lot written about this, that, you know, maybe once upon a time, Vince Russo was getting a little more power and influence, and he perceived the future of the business to be more Crash TV. And perhaps Jim Cornette preferred the more old school, more traditional presentation. And so maybe this whole NWA piece of business was done just to prove Jimmy right or wrong. What'd you think of whenever you bring back an old act, at least the name, and now you have a new version of it? I've always felt like, Eric, if you put the word new in front of something, I'm not saying World Order. I mean, like, hey, here's the new Rockers. Here's the new Midnight Express. That almost never works, right?
That's why, you know, a couple of weeks ago, you asked me about bringing back old Bray Wyatt type storyline and bringing that back to life. And I still haven't seen it, by the way. I'm going to go back and watch it in a few days. But I said it's very risky for the very reason you just pointed out. A second version, a new version of something that was incredibly popular is so risky. I mean, the odds of it being successful are so remote that they're almost not calculable, right? It's so hard. But I think they're doing it in WWE based on what I'm reading and the crowd reactions I'm seeing. And I have seen some of the clips. It's pretty awesome. But just seeing the reactions we're getting from it suggests to me that they're going to meet and exceed the expectations, which is incredibly difficult to do because people, especially, because Bray passed and he's such a beloved character and such an emotional thing, that to bring that back that's Russian roulette with 4 rounds in the chamber, basically. And to be able to pull it off is pretty amazing. And to your point here, you're trying to bring back Bart and Billy are trying to bring back something that was viewed as one of the greatest tag teams of all time. So to try to reintroduce that with new talent, tough to do, man. But I like the attempt. The idea is a great idea. They would have called them something other than, called them. It might have been better. These are both great athletes. Bart Gunn just continues. I mean, Bart Gunn looks better today than he did in 1998. What the fuck?
You're saying you mean Billy Gunn, but yeah,
or Billy Gunn. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he does look better. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
He almost knocked me out with his ass in Detroit a few years ago. Did I tell you about that?
No, I didn't know that Mr. Ass almost knocked you out with his ass.
He almost knocked me out with his ass. I was my son Jarrett was in a match. I was in his corner, and Billy was one of his opponents. It was a tag team match, and Billy's running across the ring, and I'm there, trying to cheer my son on, and I made the fucking mistake of putting my head through the ropes as I'm yelling towards my son, trying to yell at him to get up out of the corner. I didn't see Billy coming. And he hit those ropes with his ass. My face was right there before he got to the rope. I shit you not. I thought I was going to go down. I almost got knocked out by his ass. Would have been humiliating. I've been kicked in the head hard and not been knocked out. So to get knocked out with somebody's ass, it just would have shattered my self-esteem.
I don't know why that made me laugh, but it did. I apologize for that. Goodness, it got me. The next night on Monday Night Raw, the WWE would land a 5.4 rating. Nitro would turn in a 4.1.
Wow.
The following week, of course, we know it's going to be a taped Raw. That's where we would see the DX parody of the Nation of Domination. That would get a 4. But meanwhile, you guys have Hulk Hogan and Bill Goldberg in the main event for the world title, and it gets a 4.8. So Nitro gets control of the steering wheel again. You get criticized for that a lot, that perhaps that match should have been saved for pay-per-view. I mean, we even heard Neil Pruitt on the Who Killed WCW series say, boy, we threw away a lot of dollars by not putting that on pay-per-view. But what it did is it allowed Nitro to get back in the driver's seat and beat Monday Night Raw after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row. So 5 wins in a row, it looked like, for Nitro, or for Raw rather. And Goldberg and Hogan does the trick. But then, of course, Raw's back to its winning ways for 4 weeks. When you think back I know you've told me before in public and in private that Halloween Havoc 96 is probably like the peak of your experience in WCW when you were having the most fun and all that.
Right.
And 97 was so rewarding creatively, I'm sure. I mean, the Sting story, the big blow off at Starrcade, we'll set aside the finish for a minute. But then 98 does feel like when it was more fun from a competition standpoint. Because in 96, you guys were firmly in the lead. In 97, you're firmly in the lead. But that competition back and forth was interesting in 98 at a much bigger level than it was in 96 and 97. And that's, of course, because the WWF started to do more attitude stuff. They started to borrow from Nitro a little bit. And, of course, Stone Cold got super hot. And we can't forget the inclusion of Mike Tyson. 98. I know it starts to get a little frustrating for you, but are there any bright spots for you, or is it just pure frustration the whole year?
No, the frustration started in 98. It started specifically in August of 1998. Not going to go into the meeting again. I've talked about it a million times. That was when I first went, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
who are these people over here? And why are they telling me what I should do? That started in 98. Up until that moment in time, and end of July, first week in August, yeah, it was getting more competitive, but it was still a blast. We were making money hand over fist, which I want to go back to. Yeah, we should have put it on pay-per-view. We didn't need money at that time. Our revenue was not our issue. Our issue was the fact that we were starting to lose ground and the brand was starting to lose market share. And the only way you can protect long-term revenue is to protect the market share that generates it. So our focus was on television, absolutely was on television, because the only way you can retain, or in our case at this point, claw back some of the financial positions we had enjoyed and the revenue we were enjoying, is to keep the television hot. Because if the television isn't hot, guess what else isn't going to be hot? Pay-per-view. Now there's about a 6-month lag, really, maybe a little longer. But when you start losing ground in your television ratings, it doesn't happen immediately, but you will then begin to see the deterioration in every other aspect of your business. Television drives everything. So anybody that's ever actually been in the television business, specifically the wrestling business, and I'm not talking about dirt sheet, shit stain writers like Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez. They don't know fuck all about anything because they've never done anything. But our focus right then in 1998 was clawing back our dominant position in terms of ratings, because that everything else would follow. Think of it like throwing a rock in a pond. You throw that rock in a pond, it makes a big splash, but it takes a while for the ripples to get to the beach. And by the time they do, they're not as noticeable. They keep coming, and they erode the beach. In our case, the beach was revenue. So I will defend that position till I'm blue in the face. And anybody that actually has a business mind, particularly if they've been in television and in wrestling, will absolutely understand it. We were creating more revenue than we were projected to create back in 1977 when we put our budget to bed in our forecasts. We were so far above our forecast, it was ridiculous. So why would I hold something off to create revenue we didn't need, when what we really needed to do was stop the bleeding in terms of the erosion of our television ratings? Only a moron who's never been in the industry would possibly argue that.
Well, there's no morons in the ring right now, just 3 bona fide superstars. The New Age Outlaws get their hand raised, and China got to low blow Cornette. Lots of star power involved here. But we just saw the NWA Tag Team Champions against the WWF Tag Team Champions, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, get the win as the New Age Outlaws to retain their WWE Championships. Now we're setting up the next match, which is to determine who is going to win the King of the Ring. We're about to watch the King of the Ring finals with Ken Shamrock and Rocky Maivia. And these guys have had quite a story. They even hooked up back at WrestleMania, and that feud continues here. I did want to ask you though, because Road Dogg, back when he was able to do a podcast, of course, I think most people listening to this know that he got a big promotion. And as a result, he's basically living full time in Connecticut now and just home on the weekends. So he doesn't have time to record a podcast every week. I get that. But when he did have a podcast with our friend Cassio Kid, there were discussions about who was a better sports entertainer, this guy or that guy. And he would routinely piss off the internet by coming out and saying, I was a better sports entertainer than this guy or that guy or whoever. And I think sometimes people took offense to that, but he was never saying, I'm a better in-ring performer. I had better, flashier moves. My finish was cooler. He said sports entertainer for a reason, because that dude got a monster pop for just saying a little rhyme on the way to the ring and then dancing in the ring, and people would lose their mind. And he sold tens of millions of dollars of merch for DX through the years. When someone uses the phrase sports entertainer versus wrestler, that's what they mean, right, Eric?
I guess everybody has a different definition and opinion. I like sports entertainer because, again, it resonates with me, because wrestling is what wrestling is. It's entertainment first and foremost, but it is athletic, and therefore I guess you could call it a sport. Much like, I'm not even going to say it because I get so much fucking heat. I mean, people call bowling a sport. People call golf a sport. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't take talent. I'm not just suggesting that you don't have to be a great athlete. Clearly, that's obvious. But it's more of a game than it is a sport. You can talk about that all day. And I could be convinced I'm wrong pretty easily. So it's tough to distinguish between professional wrestling and sports entertainment for a lot of people. But I lean into sports entertainment because first and foremost, it needs to be entertaining. If it's not entertaining on multiple levels, it's not going to be satisfying. You're not going to build and hold an audience. So I like sports entertainment. And I think it does a better job of defining what professional wrestling really is. I'm not offended by it. And I use professional wrestling often. They're interchangeable to me. I think when you're talking about what goes on inside of the ring, and Road Dogg talks about being a better sports entertainer, I kind of agree with that, because in order to be successful, you have to be able to appeal and resonate with a large part of the audience. They either need to love you or hate you, but they need to feel strongly one way or the other. Thank you, Vern Gagne, for that sage advice. And I think Road Dogg is mostly right. You can argue with him. I could probably be convinced that I should argue with that, but that's how I feel right now.
Well, Ken Shamrock is feeling it. He's in the zone here. Did you spend much time seeing any of his work? I mean, I know he never spent any time in WCW, but I was convinced in 1998 this guy was going to be a top guy. I mean, it just felt like he was a natural opponent against Stone Cold Steve Austin. For whatever reason, I shouldn't say for whatever reason, we all know he is an OG of the UFC. He brings a lot of credibility. I mean, ABC called him the world's most dangerous man. And if nothing else, we all believed in that Stone Cold character. I mean, I know his real name is Steve Williams, but we believed that Steve Williams was Steve Austin. He felt authentic. It felt genuine. And we knew that about Ken Shamrock. Have you spent much time watching his stuff? And if so, what did you think about Ken Shamrock here in 98?
I watched some of it. You know, I was a little busy in 98 and I really wasn't, despite what people suggest, watching WWE. I didn't really have the time, to be perfectly honest. I was a little busy on Monday nights. And then I had a couple $100 million company to run during the rest of the week. So I didn't spend a lot of time watching WWE. I did watch some of his matches. I was curious about him because of his MMA background and all that. But I didn't have a strong impression of him at the time. There was something lacking. And I just saw it again as Rock and Ken were staring each other down. The difference between the look in the eyes of Rock as we're watching and Shamrock, it's subtle, but Rock is believable. That intensity I see in Rock's eyes in this clip is believable to me. Whereas Shamrock is trying to look crazy. He's trying to look intense. He's trying to be a character as opposed to being a character. I know that sounds fartsy, but I found even subtle stuff, and I was almost going to comment on about, but you're in the middle of a run and I hate interrupting people. But that one shot of these two staring each other down probably defined why Rock went on to be The Rock and why Ken Shamrock went on to be Ken Shamrock. Because Rock was believable. His look, his facials, he connected with the audience with his eyes, and they believed him. Whereas I'm not sure they believed Ken Shamrock.
It's amazing what the difference a year makes. 2 years prior to this, none of us even knew who The Rock was. He debuted in November of 1996. And by June of 97, boy, there was Die Rocky Die everywhere. People hated this guy. He had go away heat. He had been shoved down our throats as this white meat baby face. And oh, there's your blue chipper right there. We didn't like him or his pineapple Willie haircut. And then he came back as a heel, joined the Nation of Domination, started to stand in front of Farouk, started to call himself The Rock and speak about himself in third person, show some of that character work. And now here by the summer of 98, just 1 year after we hated him, He's a star on the rise. At SummerSlam, he's going to be in a ladder match against the guy who's doing commentary out there. Last year's King of the Ring winner, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, or as we're starting to call him here, Triple H. And the winner of that ladder match is going to really climb up the ladder, metaphorically and literally. He's going to become the world champion for the very first time at Survivor Series 1998. And that's pretty crazy when you think about 2 years after you make your debut. I mean, a year in, people hate you, not in a good way. 2 years in, you're the world champ. Like that career trajectory, that's not something you hear about a lot. It's rare. Kurt Angle, Goldberg, Randy Orton, The Rock. These guys were thrown into the deep water very, very quickly. And who would have thought? I mean, watching this back, there's no chance anybody watching this thought, hey, that guy's going to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. Isn't that wild?
It is. And I was thinking back, listening to you about the first time that I actually saw Rock in person. And I was checking into the Peninsula Hotel on Beverly Hills Drive, Beverly Hills, it was right next to where CAA's offices were. Right next door to that was this beautiful hotel where all the movers and shakers that were doing business in Hollywood would stay there. And there was a great bar there. I mean, I probably conducted more business at that bar than I ever did anywhere else in terms of dollar revenue, because Jason and I would always meet a lot of the network executives and people that we were doing business with. We'd always meet there, partially because it was close to our agent's office right across the street, but it was cool. And you'd be in there and Sean Connery would walk in and sit down at the bar with somebody and talk business. And, oh, there's James Brolin and Barbara Streisand having a cocktail over here. And, this is kind of a cool vibe. But I walked into that hotel to check in and Rock came in behind me. Now, I don't think he saw me. If he did, he ignored me. But he walked right by me. And I remember stopping, going, oh, it's Rock. I wonder what he's doing here. And then I remember to this day watching people watch him. He walked into that room and he wasn't making eye contact. He wasn't shaking hands. He wasn't signing autographs. He wasn't posing for pictures. He walked in, went up to the desk just like everybody else would, and people stopped in their tracks. Some of them didn't know who he was. Some of them may have recognized him, but they all went, that. And that's that kind of charisma that you're just born with it or you're not.
We got a live chat here going because when you join up at adfreeshows.com, you get to be a part of our live studio audience. And we got some questions here that I wanted to ask you. But right in the middle of these questions, Travis Medway just jumped in and gifted 583 weeks with Eric Bischoff memberships. So you too can be a member over at 83weeks.com. Be sure to join us there. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell so you know when we're going live, and make plans to join us this Sunday night for our live reaction show to Forbidden Door. Bobby wants to know, what's the reason for changing pay-per-view names versus keeping the same name per month? Also, when you add pay-per-views, how does that process work with your budget that was already approved? Let's do the second question first. How far in advance would you have to know how many pay-per-views you're going to do? Is that something that you have to negotiate 3 months out, 6 months out, 18 months out? What's that look like, Eric?
At least a year.
Okay.
I mean, because you could say, well, I want to do one pay-per-view a month, but then you got to schedule it. You got to make sure the dates are available. No other competition, not anything else going on pay-per-view. So it is a long process. I would say we probably planned at least 18 months out in terms of the number and starting to negotiate and determine locations. From a budgetary point of view, everything had to be done a year in advance. My budget had to be in, I think it was by November, end of November, middle of November, for the following year. So all of our projections, everything that we planned to do for the following year had to be presented and approved by Dick Cheatham and Dick Cheatham's boss over in Turner Finance. That was all done at least a year in advance. But in reality, we were probably planning further ahead. And we didn't just arbitrarily add pay-per-views. So we went from 4 to 6 to 8 to 12 over probably a 1 year period of time or 18-month period of time. And once we hit 12, that was it.
What's the thinking about changing the names for pay-per-views? I know that this happened a few times in WCW. Like once upon a time, we had Beach Blast, and later it was Bash at the Beach. I know that, there were a few different one-off WCW pay-per-view names, but by and large, a lot of the staples were there. You had a Super Brawl, you had a Halloween Havoc, you had Starrcade, et cetera, et cetera. Is that just all marketing? How many people were involved in that decision, naming a pay-per-view?
It would have been marketing, primarily marketing. They would have been driving that car. While I was president of the company, I would have had to sign off on things and been involved and be aware of changes that were being made. I may or may not have expressed an opinion about a name change. I typically didn't get too deep into that. I relied upon the people that specifically worked in that area to come up with the best ideas and delegated. So I didn't have a heavy hand in naming pay-per-views. Uncensored, I did. Road Wild, I did for obvious reasons. Although I didn't come up with the name, I wasn't in discussion. But beyond that, it was primarily the pay-per-view and the marketing, which would have been Sharon Sadello and or Mike Weber at some point.
I don't know the story, so I'm just going to ask. I know the first year, 1996, it was called Hog Wild. In subsequent years, it was Road Wild. I assume that Harley sent you guys a cease and desist.
Yeah, it's in typical Turner fashion. They fucking caved. No reason to. They just didn't want to fight. So they forced WCW to concession, and we did. Didn't really matter all that much. Road Wild was fine. Hog Wild I like better.
Sure, of course. Aaron Manzo was with us here live, and he says, Eric, how do you view the World Championship lineage with respect to the classic NWA lineage? Do you feel that the WCW World Heavyweight Championship of the late 90s and the World Heavyweight Championship in the WWE should carry that history? Now, that's interesting. I know that we don't spend a lot of time talking about this, but of course, the NWA technically did split from WCW in the early 90s, which is why we had a physical representation of the big gold belt, and then we created a new championship that we saw Lex Luger ultimately parade around as the first champion. But when that belt came back, we tried for a little while to have two. We stopped calling it the NWA title and eventually just called it the International Championship. But the big gold belt was a classic design that lived on in WCW through the very end. And then you famously brought it back and just gave it to Triple H on Monday Night Raw. And a lot of people just said, okay, well, we're going to pick it up from there. Do you consider that title in a weird way the linear championship for the NWA as well?
No.
Yeah.
I just have to me, and I crucified for saying this, and I apologize in advance to David Crockett. But to me, the NWA in its lineage, in its history, and whatever other value it had at some point had been so diluted and deemed meaningless over the years that to this day, I just don't look. I'm not saying it wasn't an important period in history and it wasn't an amazing success, and perhaps the NWA in some way was responsible for Ted Turner having interest in WCW and me getting the opportunity I got. So I'm not dismissing the NWA, except for to say, by the time that I was in charge in 1998, that NWA title didn't mean anything to me. I looked at the big gold belt as a WCW title, not an NWA title, even though I know where it started. It was a WCW. And it wasn't my idea to give it to Triple H. It was Vince McMahon's idea. So come on. Sound like I just gave it to him.
Well,
I was forced. I was paid to give it to him. Let's put it that way.
Jesus
I took the cash. I'm a whore. Fuck it. I took the cash. I gave him the belt.
It was a television show. I know that.
Well, I know you know, but there's people out there listening. Their fucking heads are going to explode. Say that.
Travis Medley says, hey, Eric, we know you were hamstrung by executives and standards and practices just as the WWF was firing up the Attitude Era. But how did a lot of Vince Russo's crap get on TV a year or so later? That's interesting because we have spent a lot of time talking about how, Turner would say you couldn't do this or you couldn't do that. Like once upon a time, there was a mandate from Turner that if one of the heels cheated and he threw in, brass knuckles, we could no longer call it a foreign object because that could be offensive to people who watch CNN. So we had to say international object, as if these brass knuckles were made in fucking Russia. What are we even doing? But you had to deal with some of that nonsense. And I think Travis makes a good point. Hey, if you had to deal with all of that, how did Russo get away with some silliness when you weren't there?
I can only speculate, but I think, especially after reading Guy Evans' book and now seeing Who Killed WCW series and hearing from Brad Siegel and others, here's my guess. My guess is, yeah, standards and practices starting in that meeting in August of 1998 when I met Terry Tingle. Swore to God she was a stripper, the Cheetah Club. But no, she was head of standards and practices. I love the name Terry Tingle. I just do. I think it's the best stripper name I've ever heard. It's awesome. But I think that there was an attempt while I was there to force change the executive committee onto WCW. I resisted that change. We all know how that worked out. September 10th, 1999, I was gone. For about a month and a half or 2 months, Bill Bush, who was like a fucking deer in the headlights, he was an accountant. He didn't know anything about the wrestling business. He didn't know anything about the product. He didn't know anything about the television business. He knew how to add and subtract and multiply. That was it. And he knew he was over his head. So he brought in Vince Russo, who, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, he's a fucking snake charmer. Right. And I think he came in and said, look, if I'm going to turn this is what I got. You got to let me do what I want to do. And I'm going to do for you what I did for WWE. I was the guy that turned WWE around. I was the man who was responsible, not Vince McMahon, not even me. It was all me. I can do it for you. And I think the snakes got charmed. I think Brad went, and again, now after listening to Brad's interview, he was feeling the pressure. He didn't want that company. He didn't like that company. He wasn't originally supporting the idea of wrestling on the TNT network. He was forced into it by Ted Turner. He wasn't even in the fucking room when the decision was made. He was accommodating. And he did support it once that decision is made. He knew he didn't have any vote. But I suspect that Brad was really feeling the pressure and gave enough rope to Russo and standards and practices backed off to see if his shtick would work. 3 months later, I get a phone call. What does that tell you? And in that phone call, Brad, when we started talking about why Brad was interested in bringing me back and what my role was going to be, Brad's exact words, I'm not ad-libbing here, I'm not improvising in any way, shape, or form, was Russo's stuff is too dark. It's just not working. Those are his words, not mine. I think they gave him enough rope. It didn't work. They went, fuck it, let's bring Eric back. But I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes when I was gone and why he was able to get away with some of the absolute dreck that he put out there. It's fucking horrible. I don't know.
We just saw King of the Ring crowned. Ken Shamrock is victorious. The previous winner, Triple H, was on commentary, and out of nowhere, Ken Shamrock locked on the ankle lock. The Rock submits, and Ken Shamrock is on the rise. But what's next is going to be one of the most famous moments of The Undertaker's career, of Mick Foley's career, and of even JR's career. His most famous call. As you and I are recording this morning, we need to give a shout out to JR. He is still in the hospital. He went to the ER yesterday with having some trouble breathing. He's back in Jacksonville Beach, and he was thinking, man, he was going to make the move to Oklahoma. He's got a better support system there, and his family's there. And I know that he was trying to figure out, hey, what am I going to do with my condo down here at the beach? And as he's down there visiting, man, he just start to feel so well, goes to the hospital, and they kept him overnight. So thoughts and prayers going up for JR. If that's your sort of thing, throw one up for the voice of wrestling. We sure are pulling for JR this morning.
Is he back home? Is JR back home, or is he still in the hospital?
He's in the hospital.
Wow. That's concerning.
We're setting up a big main event here, a co-main event. It really ought to be the main event. Maybe it's what everybody remembers and talks about the most. As I mentioned, it's JR's most famous call, easily the most famous moment of Mick Foley's career as well. And it's a spectacle like no other. And this is not the first Hell in a Cell. but it is clearly and easily the most famous Hell in a Cell. And after the matches prior that we've seen in the Hell in a Cell, a lot of people are wondering, and how could it be better than what, say, Undertaker and Shawn did in the Hell in a Cell? Well, a friend of mine has said before, in business and in life, you can be less than, be better than, or you can be different than. Well, this is different than. We're about to see something that we've never seen before, and hopefully, respectfully, never see again. It just costs too much physically for Mr. Foley. And this is the stuff that legends are made of. So people continue to try to raise the bar. And we've seen some crazy stunts. I mean, my goodness, look at some of the things Darby Allin's done in AEW.
Yeah, but Darby Allin weighs about $140. Mick Foley was what, 280? I mean, for a guy as big as Mick Foley to put himself through what he put himself through is so different than a 140 or 160 pound person doing. It's, I saw Mick, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, it's all cool. I just, I wanted to ask, why do you think this particular, I don't know another way to call it. I'm not trying to be dismissive. I know that we're about to see a real moment here, but this is a stunt on some level.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is stuntman work, what we're about to see here. And yes, it's part of a bigger story and blah, blah, blah. I'm not diminishing it, but I'm wondering, why do you think the stunts that have followed this don't resonate the way this one did? Is it simply because the technology has changed and we didn't have social media back then, so we couldn't just find the next thing and move on so quickly? I mean, this thing was legendary. And there's been crazy, dangerous risks and stunts that have happened in wrestling in years since, but none really connect and leave that lasting impression the way this one does. Can you put your finger on maybe why that might be?
Probably because it was considered to be one of the first times what to call it? I don't want to call it a stunt because Mick would be offended by that, but can't think of anything else, so I'll go with stunt for the time being. But this was the first time something as extreme and visual had ever really occurred. And it's hard when you're not first, it's hard to get the recognition for doing something, even if it's bigger and more dangerous in some respects. But I also think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Mick Foley was almost 300 fucking pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, physics, even if you don't know anything about physics, you kind of get it. And while we see smaller guys doing a lot of crazy extreme shit, it's not the same as seeing someone as massive as Mick Foley was at the time. What is he, 6'4"?
Yeah, he's 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds.
300 pounds coming off the top of a stage. You don't need a calculator to look at the physics aspect of this and go, oh, man, is that amazing. And I think that's why. That and the fact that it was really the first, and everybody else is trying to achieve what Mick Foley was able to achieve back in 1998, and they're always going to fall short.
As a reminder, The Undertaker is working hurt here, and I mean it badly. Like, he can barely walk on this ankle, and they make the decision to start the match on the top of the cage. Mick Foley and I have broken this down. It's available on YouTube, and we'll link it in the comments of our YouTube at 83weeks.com. But I think it was all born out of a conversation with Terry Funk, where they were discussing, hey man, how could you possibly top what's already happened in these Hell in a Cell matches? And the discussion was, what if you started the damn thing on top? And they do. So the whole idea behind this cage is it's not just a regular cage match where you can escape. There's a top on it. There is no escape. You can't leave. So what if we do some shenanigans before we ever get in the thing? And as you see them walking across the top, man, that's a lot of weight. You got two guys there that are 600 pounds and they're walking around up there. And at any moment that chain link fence could give way, and they're in a bad way.
That is just crazy.
Yeah.
That is so crazy. And I hate to admit this, but I haven't watched this match.
Look at that, Eric. When he steps
I've seen clips of this, but this is fucking nuts. Look at that. You know why I couldn't do that? Because instead of focusing on what I'm going to do next, I'd be standing there shitting myself in front of 10, 15,000 people. Oh my God. This is crazy.
One of my favorite Mick Foley comments is one of his first times in WCW. Oh, here we go. It's about to happen right now, Eric. Are you ready for this?
Kind of, sort of.
Oh, my. Wow.
Oh, God. Unbelievable. You know, I just saw Mick about 2 weeks ago in St. Augustine, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
He was at the same convention I was at. And he said he stopped by and say hi, and we talked for a moment. He was on his way out. But I'm so glad I saw him, and knowing that he's pretty much okay. He's walking a little stiff, walking a little slow, but he looked pretty good and he was smiling. Because after seeing this, I wouldn't know what to expect if I saw Mick again. Wow.
We recently sat down and talked with Tom Carlucci over at adfreeshows.com, and you're going to see somebody run across the front of the camera right there. That was Tom Carlucci. He's got the headset on and he's moving out of the way. As they talked about this beforehand, his only instruction to Carlucci, who's the floor manager for the company at the time, helping with the international tables, Foley's only instruction was get the fuck out of the way. Because he knew if he falls on somebody, it's bad for him, but it's really bad for the person he falls on. And all I could think is, you see, look how close he is to that monitor. Terry Funk is out checking on him, but he just flipped the top of that table over. The monitor is right by Funk's knee. If Foley had come down on one of those monitors, now, Eric, I'm not saying that you worked necessarily in the production side, but you've seen those monitors. You know that those things are metal bricks. I mean, that's the reason they're made that way.
That's the best way to describe it. It's like a fucking concrete block with a screen.
And it's done that way so they can travel, and it's not going to be fragile as a regular television would. So they can throw it in those road cases and just beat it up and take it to the next town over and over and over. But it is a metal brick. And the idea that Foley is falling right beside it, like, what if he hits that thing? That's the end. He lost consciousness.
Do you know, because you've talked with Mick about this, do you know what he was saying to Terry Funk right here?
He doesn't know what he's saying. He's got a concussion.
Oh my God.
He's not all the way there. And here's the crazy part.
Ugh.
We're not done. That's not the end of the match. As a matter of fact, it hasn't even really started. They're going to do more. That's not the finish.
And Conrad, he threw himself. There was no inhibition.
No.
There was no trying to control anything. That looked like he got thrown out of an office building. I mean, that was brutal.
And really, when you take a look at how he rotates and turns his body and lands on the table, he could not have done it any better.
No.
But this is not something, and I know everybody listening to this knows this, but this is not something where before the doors are open for fans, they're walking through this and he's taking this bump a few times to make sure he's got it. I mean, that's not what you do.
No, there's no practice.
We're going to do it one time, and you better get every fucking angle you can, because it ain't happening again. And now the Undertaker's on the top of the cage. They're going to raise the cage. And I thought this added to the realism of it. Vince McMahon personally is down there. And, you know, this is something that we didn't see a lot in this era. And I know it's still the Mr. McMahon era, but he doesn't appear to be Mr. McMahon here. He's the concerned owner. He
broke character.
Yes. And it was, my dad used to tell me about this with Bear Bryant and Alabama injuries. If a player was injured, you know, obviously the crew would go out there and the staff, and they would help the fallen player. But when Joe Namath got hurt, Bear Bryant went on the field. And that was a big deal that my dad noticed as a kid, like, wow. And it added a layer of realism and concern, and it felt bigger. It felt important. It felt special. And that's what McMahon is doing here. As a 16-year-old, Eric, I guess I just turned 17. I was losing my freaking mind watching this. I mean, I will never forget watching this live, where I was, who was in the house, because it didn't feel like a wrestling show. It's like we just saw something I don't want to say tragic because no one died, but it felt tragic at the time. Like, what happened? Is he alive?
Well, really amazing moment in professional wrestling. One that I pray we don't see duplicated again. I don't think we see any more of this. Let Mick Foley have this moment. Let's not try to out Mick Foley. Mick Foley, it's not going to be able to be achieved, number one, and it's too risky. But this was an amazing moment in professional wrestling, and I can see why people still talk about it to this day. Absolutely can see it.
Now, here's where the story gets crazy. They're trying to attend to him, all the EMT, Sergeant Slaughter, the referees. We see the Undertaker climbing down the cage, and Foley has told me, as we discussed this match many times, that he was concerned about having the upper body strength to be able to climb up the cage. He knew this first spot was planned, and now here comes the Spirit of 76 comeback against all advice, against everyone's orders. He's back up off the dresser, the stretcher. I'll get it. And he's climbing the top of the cage. The Undertaker sees him, and he's climbing the top of the cage on the other side, and they're going to meet in the middle. This feels like a horror movie mixed with an old Western. And what's crazy to say, Eric, is the most brutal part of the match hasn't even happened yet. It's still to come. And it wasn't planned. What we're about to see right here, Eric, is a total accident. A choke slam through the cage gives way, and the chair comes down on top of him.
Oh, my God.
I know you weren't wrestling in this ring in particular, Eric, but before you got there, you at least heard other performers describe the WWF ring compared to pretty much anybody else's ring. And it was universal that it was the toughest, most concrete-like ring in the business. And now at 300 pounds, and look, the Undertaker falls, jacks up that ankle even more. And he is completely out of it because that was not supposed to happen. This was never part of the plan. You see those black things in the ring there by Terry Funk's feet. Those were zip ties holding that fence together. They went for a choke slam not knowing it was going to go through, but it did. Funk realizes his friend's in trouble, so he just throws himself in there and says, hey, do something with me. Literally choke slams the Funker out of his tennis shoes. But when Foley wakes up, he sees the tennis shoes in the ring and wonders, whose are those? He has no idea that Terry Funk was ever in the ring with him. And the chair comes down, and that's what knocks the tooth out of his mouth, through the roof of his nose. It's unbelievable.
This is the first time I've ever watched this match in its entirety. I've seen clips of the bump a million times, but just the bump doesn't do it justice.
It does not.
This is fucking amazing.
Eric, they're not done. They've got more violence planned, a stunt that we've never seen in WWE before in 1998. Foley is the guy who goes and orders a pizza and says, give me everything on it. I don't think he's ordered ever in his life just a cheese and pepperoni because we're throwing everything at this match. Right now, he has a tooth hanging out of his nose that's gone through the roof of his mouth. He's got a concussion. God. He's got broken ribs. I mean, he can barely fucking stand, but we're not stopping the match. Why would we stop the match? Look. He's poking his tongue around. He's got a hole in his lip where the tooth is torn through. And he has no idea.
This is hard to watch.
The sacrifices that Mick Foley did for this business and this industry, the idea that when people talk about all-time greats and they don't just rattle him off as a standard for one member of the Mount Rushmore, not just his work as Mick Foley and all the charitable stuff he did, not the fun Mankind or the dark Mankind or even the silly Dude Love or Cactus Jack, but just the physical toll. And I mean, listen, we don't talk about money a lot here on the program. He's not the top paid guy in the promotion here. But, you know, That doesn't matter to him. He's doing it for art. He's doing it because he loves it. He's doing it for fans. He's doing it for his legacy. Because there's no amount of money you could assign and you'd say, okay, well, I'll do it for that.
I almost don't even know what to say. Watching him walk around with his tooth sticking out of his nostril.
Yes.
I mean, that's easy. Mick, I've always had a lot of respect for you, but I can't wait to see you next time.
It's unbelievable.
All I got to say, this is crazy.
Of course, Meltzer would write page after page after page saying, we never need to see this ever again. Like, this was dangerous on a level that's bad for him. It's bad for his family. It's bad potentially for the industry. Like, this set a bad precedent for violence. And I don't think anybody will ever talk about a match the way they talk about this one again. There you see, I always wonder, why do we shoot that? Like, why would we get a stone cold close up of the Undertaker cutting his forehead there? My goodness. Show literally anything else.
I wonder how long it took to start feeling somewhat normal after this match. I mean, this had to take months to get over.
I don't think he's all the way over it now.
I would agree with that. I don't know how he could be. I don't know how your body could possibly, structural point of view, survive that without long-term. I just don't think it's done. Back, hips, knees, shoulders. Oh my God! And he landed when he came through the ring. That was just flat on his back. That was not a flat back bump. He just dropped like a bag of potatoes, flat on his back.
Eric, I'm not saying this.
What do you think that is? 15 feet?
Well, yeah, at least.
From the top of the cage to the ring mat?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's probably, 12.
Maybe 12.
12. But still, and again, I'm not making light. I know that you had a real life circumstance, but you were just talking about last night on our live show over at 83weeks.com. The way you hurt your back is lifting a 200-pound railroad tie. And you just see what he did to his back. And it's like, think about how excruciating your pain was from lifting something incorrectly, maybe. And now you were just debilitated. Look what he just did. And he's still wrestling. It's unbelievable.
He is one unique individual.
Yes.
One unique individual.
And you kind of forget,
he deserves to be as highly regarded as he is.
Yes.
And I just feel bad that I haven't watched this entire match until now, because I've been missing out. And this is not my kind of match.
No,
folks. This is not something that I would book. It's not something that I would get excited about as a fan. But I certainly understand why it has become as memorable and such an iconic match. Because while it may not be my style of a match, a lot of other people do like this extremely violent presentation. And you're never going to get a presentation to meet or even begin to exceed what we've seen here. Because I don't think it's physically possible without a death taking place.
No, I totally.
Injury.
By the way, here comes the big surprise. For the first time ever, yes, those are thumbtacks in a WWE ring. I mean, to have the foresight to think, I'm going to do the big bump off the top, then we'll work with the stairs and the chairs, and then we'll break out the thumbtacks. He still did all that, but the choke slam through the cage was never supposed to be part of it. And at no point did they say, hey, that's enough. We should just go home right now. No, we're still doing a match.
Which they could have and should have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that would have been, had they decided, let's call it, take the fall, Mick, we're done, we're going home, we're taking you to the hospital, we're gonna pull your teeth out of your fucking nasal cavities, try to glue you back together to get you to the hospital. Ending that match on that bump would have been just perfectly awesome.
Yes.
It would have been it wouldn't have felt like a compromise. So to add more on top of it all, just, I think, is a testimony to Mick and his commitment, as well as Undertaker. Because if I'm Undertaker, I'm begging this guy to stop. I'm begging this cat to go home. I'm looking at his fucking teeth coming out of his nose, and I'm talking to him and saying, dude, we're done. Come on. Go get a beer, a pizza. Well, no pizza for you because you don't have any teeth. They're sticking out of your nose. Crying out loud. They're still going.
I mean, I remember watching this back, and the first time Mick went for a pinfall afterwards, I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot. We're still wrestling a match. Like, after all this, you just put your arm over the guy and you could still win. But take a look at what's about to happen there. That spot he made famous in WCW with Vader. And he hoped when Vader did it to him on the ramp that it would just bust his guts up so bad that he could cash in on his Lloyds of London. And when it didn't, he was disappointed. So he just had Undertaker do the same spot to him. But Undertaker wasn't exactly in the right spot that Foley wanted, where he could get all of the thumbtacks. So to make sure that he still got that visual, Foley just rolls around on him and then says,
hey, he rolled around like a chicken leg in his flour right before you throw it in a fucking frying pan. He was rolling around in that thing. My God.
Hey, Undertaker missed it, so I'll fix that.
Don't have enough thumbtacks in my back, so I'm going to roll around on this stuff.
And we'll do a choke slam in it. And you know what? Why don't you just tombstone me right on the thumbtacks too? God damn it. What are we doing? This is unbelievable. What a visual this is. Mercifully, thankfully, it's over. And look at the crowd. Pittsburgh never forgot what they saw. A standing ovation. It was, respectfully to the Undertaker, a one-man show. And I don't even think the Undertaker would argue that. He's in here barely able to walk with a bad ankle. And we were concerned, man, can Undertaker pull this match off? Little did we know, we need wheelchairs. We need gurneys. We need a med flight for Mick Foley. My God.
And even just think about that last bump, tombstone pile driver on a bad wheel.
Yes.
That could have gone bad.
Yes.
That's not the safest move in the world. That's a high risk move. You're tired. You're beat to fuck. Got a bad wheel. And now I'm going to hit you with a tombstone pile driver. Oh my God. Hats off to both of these. This is nuts.
Coach Keith is watching live with us, and he says, I remember watching this pay-per-view drunk as hell, and this match got me sobered real quick. I still can't believe this match. I'm a guy who went to ECW in Philly every month. Man, I can't believe you just saw this for the first time, but it's hard to even describe this to someone who's never seen it. Wouldn't you agree?
100%. I've been hearing about this match for 25 fucking years. And I've always not. Yeah, that was crazy. That bump off the top. Oh man, that was nuts. Holy crap. I can't believe Mick did that. That's Mick Foley. But I never sat down and watched it from beginning to end completely. And I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned. Mick Foley, that I saw Mick Foley 3 weeks ago smiling and walking through a convention center.
Yeah, you wouldn't have guessed that watching that match. Gavin Napier says, I love this match, but I don't think two guys have stayed in the cage for the entire match since this. In that way, it ruined cage matches going forward. I don't know if necessarily that it ruined cage matches, but certainly the premise of this match was we're putting a top on it so there's no escape. They did find a workaround, and I do feel like in subsequent Hell in a Cells, certainly where Shane McMahon was involved, there's now an expectation. Oh, well, he's coming off the top. Oh, well, there's got to be a big crazy stunt. Like on some level, the Hell in a Cell match was changed forever because of this match, because there is an expectation that, oh, well, they got to do something crazy. And so even when Shane took the bump off the top here, allegedly they had something under the table to help break the fall. And then people were like, well, it's not the same. Well, no, it's common sense. I don't like that. It feels like we have to continue to do this. And can you top this? And it always happens to diminishing returns.
I absolutely agree with you. And I do think cage matches have become irrelevant for the most part. Now, maybe Hell in a Cell is going to be different continually, but cage matches have just become a meaningless prop. No reason to have them, no storyline leading into them. It's just, you're selling the perceived danger of the cage, and it is what it is. But this match, I really hope no one ever tries to top any of this shit again, including Shane McMahon. He's getting a little older now, so maybe Maybe he'll talk himself out of it if he gets to AEW and gets on top of an AEW ring. Just let this one stand on its own, folks. No need to try to compete because it's not possible. Not in Live.
Travis Medway wants to know, did you hear requests from your talent the following day? Anybody trying to top this? Does professional pride have the locker room pushing to do crazy stuff?
No. I think most of the locker room, probably if we could assemble whoever's left right now and we took a vote on the number of people in that room that would like to raise their hand and try to compete with something like they just saw, they would have said, fuck you. I ain't going near that. Now this is uniquely Mick Foley. This is Mick Foley. This is nobody else. There's no one else that will put themselves through what Mick Foley has put him through, not only in this match, which is just, my mind is still scrambled, but this was kind of what Mick Foley's style was all about. It's one of the reasons that he was no longer in WCW. He just couldn't justify the risks that Mick Foley wanted to take for his art. Just got to the point where we had to say, no, publicly held company, there's just too much risk. And we don't want to be responsible for what could happen to you, Mick. Mick left. And he continued and elevated the risks even more so. And did it in a way that resonated with the audience. It wasn't just setting himself on fire and throwing himself off buildings for the sake of it. It wasn't just for the stunt. There was a tremendous amount of emotion in what they did do in the ring. Yes, it was ultra violent, but watching Mick Foley trying to make his comeback, as beat up as he was, and seeing Undertaker sell for him and start to give him that comeback, that's what creates the drama. And it happened slow and plotting. It wasn't a high-paced, fast-paced match. It was a dangerous, high-impact match. Still an adequate amount of emotion, a tremendous amount of emotion as a result of what they did in the ring. It was fucking awesome.
Let's do another question here, or a comment rather. I want you to react to this because I think it's spot on. Gavin Napier says, it's arguably the greatest spectacle of all time. As far as spectacles in wrestling, it's got to be number one for me. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I just can't imagine anybody ever coming close to this.
I mean, it's going to be hard to top. And speaking of hard, today's episode is brought to you by BlueChew. Let's talk about sex, guys. Remember the days when you were always ready to go? Maybe it was back in June of 98. Just a stiff breeze would hit you and boing. You can feel like that again here. BlueChew is a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. So that means no awkward conversations and no waiting in line at the office or the pharmacy rather. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. BlueChew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code 83weeks at checkout. Pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is 83weeks to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast. Eric, we're watching a recap video here of Kane in 1998. And we see all the fire and all the effects and the costuming and the lighting and the music and just the whole presentation. And I got to ask, I know you don't like this, but I got to ask, do you think that perhaps this Kane presentation and the way he was presented as a serious threat, is that what we needed for the Dungeon of Doom to succeed? Because this is kind of silly too. I mean, if you really think about the Undertaker presentation and his story, and you think about the Kane presentation and his story, in the confines of wrestling, where we've got the realism of a Stone Cold Steve Austin, it feels pretty damn silly. But so did the Dungeon of Doom. But this is still presented in a much more serious way. So we're able to suspend our disbelief, and it feels more real, even if really, if you get it down to brass tacks, it's all kind of theatrical and silly. What was missing in the Dungeon of Doom presentation that's not in the Kane and Undertaker presentation?
Credibility and consistency.
Okay.
I think the Kane character, it falls into that very highly animated type of character that I tried to get away from in WCW. But it worked in WWE largely because of the association with Undertaker. Talk about a rub. Undertaker had a tremendous amount of credibility. Kane was able to benefit from that in his association. And the consistency in Kane's character allowed people to look past the cartoonish element of it and believe in it because they were consistent. They stuck with it, and it didn't change much. And it had credibility from the get-go. So I think the two answers are consistency and credibility. And I would say credibility first and foremost, and then consistency.
I know that we
the Dungeon of Doom, and I'll please, Kevin Sullivan, if you hear this or you hear somebody talking about it, please understand, I mean this in no disrespect. WCW was where WCW was at the Dungeon of Doom came along. But we didn't have the budget. We didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the commitment to quality and consistency when it came to our characters and just the way they looked, the way they dressed, the way they were lit. We didn't do any of that. We just threw them out there in whatever gimmicks they brought to TV that particular. And oftentimes those changed. So then that's what I mean about consistency. This is a well thought out character that they made a long-term commitment to. Long-term means, yes, you're going to go through ebbs and flows as you build that character, because you can't introduce a character and have the audience embrace that character to the degree you want them to over a short period of time. It takes a long time. And I think that's one of the reasons why WWE has been consistent. Go back and look at Roman Reigns. Go back and look at your comments about The Rock. He was being shoved down our throat. Well, yes, he was. And when that was no longer working, they took a different attack. They were committed to The Rock, just like they were committed to Roman Reigns. Back in 2018, when I was hearing about how he was being shoved down everybody's throat, the audience was sick of him. Did they just cut him loose? Send him to some farm team somewhere? Go further develop? No, they figured out a way to fix it, and they continued pushing him. So there has been over the years, I think, examples of the kind of commitment to consistency, at least commitment. And sometimes you do have to change gears, but the commitment to the characters in WWE has always been established, especially looking back. Whereas in WCW for a long time, it was, let's try this. That didn't work. Okay, let's bring him back as that. Ah, shit, that sucked. Let's just have him come out as himself and see if that works. There was a lot of throwing things up against the wall, hoping to find something that stick. And there wasn't a lot of thought and preparation, design and detail that went into those characters. A lot of times guys would just show up and put on whatever Zulu makeup they had in their bag that their wife or girlfriend gave them and try to look interesting. I mean, there's just very little thought given to characters. Where I think in WWE, a tremendous amount of thought was given to characters. It's a lot of the difference.
I do want to follow up and ask some more questions about Kane, but first I want to make sure you're getting a good look at Steve Austin's elbow here, Eric. He was in the hospital earlier this same week. He's going to check himself out not to miss this show. And he's got that elbow wrapped up something serious because he's got a fucking staph infection as he's working this match.
Yeah, that's
scary. Dangerous.
And very dangerous, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, he's not got his elbow taped up and he's out mowing the fucking lawn.
He's throwing it against the mat over and over and over.
And that ring is not necessarily the most sanitary place you're going to find in an arena either.
It was just covered in thumbtacks a few minutes ago.
It's bacteria and all kinds of nasty shit. And I mean, staph infection can kill you.
Absolutely.
This is crazy.
We got some questions about Kane, but one of the things I want to point out, Gavin Napier says Kane would have legitimized Glacier, Mortis, and Wrath. That is interesting because we've said on this very program many times that presentation was just out of date compared to the NWO. You contrast the realism and maybe the over the top theatrical presentation of those characters. But maybe you're right. That consistency, they can coexist because they are here on the other channel.
Yeah, they can. And I think it had, Kane come to WCW as Kane, that character, which legally would have been impossible. But
right.
Let's pretend it was possible for a second, sake of discussion. Yeah, Kane coming over would have added the credibility to Mortis and Glacier the same way that Undertaker provided that credibility to Kane. I mean, that's the rub. You hear people use the word all the time, sometimes correctly, sometimes not. But that's the rub. That's the transfer of equity from one character to another, and from that character to another. And theoretically, if it would have been possible for Kane to come over, even though the whole Glacier thing and Mortis thing was kind of late, should have happened about 2 years earlier, would have been on fire, perhaps. But even putting Kane in late, theoretically, if it would have absolutely changed the landscape.
Take a look at the cage coming down from the ceiling. They're sending down the Hell in a Cell, and there's something that's still to come on this show that you will not believe, Eric. But can we just take a minute and give Steve Austin his kudos, first of all, for coming out here and working with a staph infection in a main event, in a first blood match with a guy wearing a freaking red mask. But as if that wasn't enough, he's got to follow what we just saw with Foley and Undertaker. And I know he's the hottest star in the business, but damn nation, how in the world do you follow that? Do you have a gun? I mean, what else can you do, right? Yeah, there's got to be switchblades and nunchucks and guns involved to follow what we just saw.
And I wonder I wonder what Steve was thinking when he was backstage getting ready to come out for this match. He may or may not have been watching what was happening before this, what he was going through. I would imagine he was watching it. I'd love to. Next time I talk to Steve, I'm going to ask him, what the fuck were you thinking as you're coming down the aisle heading to that ring after what we just saw?
What can you do? I mean, that's the thing.
And to you, I mean, you just said, kudos to Austin. This is why Steve Austin became Steve. This is one tough son of a bitch.
Yes.
I mean, physically tough, obviously. But what's less obvious is the mental toughness.
Yes, sir.
This, unbelievable. Austin deserves the iconic stature that he's obviously. This is an example why.
We should mention too, just like 3 days after this is when you announce that it's going to be Goldberg and Hulk Hogan on Monday Nitro. I mean, we are knee deep in the Monday Night Wars here. Coach Rosie wants to know, in your opinion, Eric, what was the most violent injury in your WCW tenure? Like, of all the crazy, because we just saw something we'll never see again, hopefully, with Foley. But of all the crazy injuries and violence and things like that you saw in WCW, what's as close as we got to what we just saw? I mean, nothing compares, but what was the high point of WCW violence?
We didn't do anything to compare with this, number one. So I can't make a comparison. I started to misunderstand your question and I figured it out at the end, but I thought you were going to ask me what was the most violent thing I've ever seen or injury that I ever saw. And that would have to be Sid breaking his leg, but that wasn't part of a match that was created to present this kind of violence.
Right.
Presentation. That was just almost a freak injury. In terms of just physical, I can't think of one, to be honest with you. I'm sure we had some that were memorable to other people, but not to me. I can talk about great matches. I love Booker T and Chris Benoit. I could watch that another best of 7 times. We had a lot of great matches, but I just don't recall anything that could even be compared remotely to what we've seen in the last 2 matches here.
Mr. Epic wants to know, If you knew what you know now, would you have pushed for Foley to not involve himself in in-ring performances in TNA?
No, by the time I got to, I would have tried to talk him out of it personally as a friend, out of concern or his future well-being. But at that point, from a business perspective, not been something I would have given any thought to. It wasn't my role, wasn't my job. But on a personal basis, I would have absolutely liked to go out and have a beer with Mick and talk about what he was doing and how much fun it could be to walk around when you're 65 years old.
I've heard both Kevin Nash and Kevin Sullivan talk about meeting at Nitro the next day, having both seen this match, and it being the discussion in the backstage area, catering and whatnot. And they were both sort of like, we're not going to be able to compete with that. We don't have anything that can compare to that. Do you remember that being a sentiment amongst a lot of people in WCW the next day? Everyone talking about this and like, man, we're not doing anything close to that.
I don't. Again, I was in the office far more than I was in the arena. So most of my time was spent in the office, not in the and meaning talent. I don't remember a lot of conversation about it. I wouldn't have even wanted to try to think of ways to compete with this because this just has never been my go-to creatively. Let's do something fucking crazy where someone might die. It's never been a premise I've tried to work.
I mentioned the Hulk Hogan Goldberg match being announced just a few days after this. And we actually got a question here from Anthony D, who says, do you know if Hulk watched this show prior to you pitching the Goldberg Nitro match? As I understand it, that match had been advertised for quite a while as a dark match. And then perhaps he called you and called an audible and made it a part of the show to drop the title to Goldberg. Do I have that time right? Is that right?
No. I mean, this is the first I've heard that Goldberg and Hogan have been determined to be a dark match. Hey, Hulk, I got an idea. Come on over here. Here, I got a beer for you. Sit up, big man. So I got this idea. We're going to be in Atlanta, right? And I know we've never used you in a dark match before, but let's do a dark match between you.
He did dark matches all the time, Eric. All the time.
He wouldn't have done it with Goldberg. He wouldn't have done it in Atlanta. And if you did a dark match, it's the end of the night to send people home.
Yeah.
Happy. And those were mostly angles, not matches. Those were spots, not matches for the most part. They didn't last long. No. Somebody else talked about it and never got to my desk. When Hulk called me and said, hey, I got an idea. Let's do me and Goldberg main event. That was the first conversation I had ever heard, even as a passing comment about actually wrestling. So
what do you make of the criticism that people say that the reason Hulk made that pitch to you is he knew all the Turner executives are going to be here and there's already 40,000 tickets sold. We're going to be up against the taped Monday Night Raw. We're going to win the ratings that night. It's going to be a high watermark, most attended WCW match in history. All the Turner brass will be there. I want to be in the main event for the world title.
I can understand because of the narrative about Hulk being selfish and it was always all about him. It's a false narrative. Different than any other talent that worked at the top for an extended period of time and was concerned about protecting his character because that's how they get to the top, by the way. But he was no more aggressive about it. He was no more self-serving than that. And I know people say, oh, you just see Nick because you're friends with Hulk. I'm saying it because it's true. And if you need to further understand the bullshit that the narrative is built around, consider this fact. If you believe that Hulk Hogan was selfish and only out for himself, only concerned about himself and greedy, why would he put himself out there and try to churn up all of this goodwill with Turner executives? It didn't fucking matter because he's not going to make one more nickel. He was under contract. He wasn't going to get a raise. Not like Brad Siegel was going to stand up, him and his buddy Stu Snyder sharing a box of popcorn, having a beer, going, "Hey, Hulk, over here. Oh, hey, Hulk. Hey, this is so cool. I'm going to give you a raise." Or, "This is so cool, Hulk. We're going to extend your contract." Silliness to think that way. But again, that's what bullshit wrestling narrative tends to get people to buy into. Because on the surface, it would sound, well, if he's greedy, then he's self-serving. And if he's self-serving, well, of course he would do that. He's not doing it for the fans. He's not doing it for the company. He's not doing it for Bill Goldberg, which is the real issue. He's not doing it. He's just doing it for himself.
Hey, take a look at what we just saw there. I don't know if you're paying attention, but Mick Foley's back out there.
Oh my God. And he's running.
Yeah, he did a run in with a tooth hanging out of his nose, with a hole in the roof of his mouth and in his
He
lips.
probably went back and
With
saw that
concussion.
tooth sticking out of his nose, and somebody said, "Let's get that thing out of there." And Mick Foley went, "No, I want my teeth in my nostril. It makes me look crazier."
I don't think he was saying that. Look at his boots. He's still got the thumbtacks hanging out. This is an unbelievable spectacle. What a one-man show and performance this is. I didn't mean to cut you off or derail the Hogan talk, because I just wanted to point out, holy shit, since you've never seen it, Mick Foley's still not done. He's still out there. I want to remind everybody that if we are going to shit on Hulk Hogan, and I understand that a lot of people like to do that, I get it. I'm just throwing it out there. This contract that Eric has been criticized for giving Hulk in 1998 happened on May 29th, 1998. So it's not like he was doing this with Goldberg to get this big contract. He already had it. And you might even note that he is getting a % of the pay-per-view revenue. So on some level, if he was really out to just make as much money as he could, that Goldberg-Hogan match would have happened on a pay-per-view. He didn't pitch it on a pay-per-view. He didn't make any extra money for doing it on TV, but he would have made a lot of extra money had he done it on pay-per-view. He just didn't. And by the way, as if that's not enough, the Undertaker is now dousing the referee in gasoline. This is what you had to compete with, Eric. This is the reason we had to get Goldberg to wrestle Hulk Hogan on Nitro. We're setting dudes on fucking fire with thumbtacks and stairs and Hell in a Cell, and goodness gracious.
This is so crazy.
Right?
And by the way, I'm going to finish up on the Hulk Goldberg thing. Hulk took Bill Goldberg under his wing very, very early. And of course, you're going to have the haters. Yeah, he did that because he saw Goldberg was going to be the next big star. He believed in Bill Goldberg. He nurtured Bill Goldberg to a large degree when Bill first got there and started spending time in the locker room. When I say Hulk took him under his wing, he basically went to Henry Holmes, who was Hulk Hogan's attorney, and George Foreman's attorney, and really a lot of Maria Natralova's attorney, Billie Jean King's attorney. He was a very, very established attorney, entertainment attorney. And he made sure that Goldberg hooked up with Henry Holmes because Hulk wanted to protect Bill and wanted Bill to make as much money as possible. Actually, to my chagrin, I got a little hot about it because it ended up costing WCW a lot more money than it should have at that time. But when I say Hulk took Bill Goldberg under his wing, and Bill may not even agree with this, but I know what Hulk did for Bill early on, including wanting to see Bill get over in front of the executives at Turner Broadcasting, because Bill wasn't financially in the position that Hulk Hogan was. And as you rightfully pointed out, I'm grateful to you for doing it. Hulk had absolutely nothing to gain, as his contract was done months before this. This was Hulk doing for Bill Goldberg for all of the right reasons. Nothing selfish, nothing nefarious, all for Bill.
Hey, let me hit you with this.
That's the truth about that.
Let me hit you with this. Here's the real number. It's in his contract. Go Google it. If you just type in Hulk Hogan, WCW 1998 contract, you'll see it. You'll see what the buy rate would have been. You can guess what the buy rate would have been for Hulk Hogan Goldberg. Hulk would have made a bonus of $1.75 million had he done that match on pay-per-view instead of on television. He did it on television instead. So
or Bill Goldberg's benefit.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Like, if he really was in it for me, you're going to wrestle the same match either way. You want to do it on television for free where more people will see it and it'll make this guy, or Would you rather say, hey, he'll still be made on pay-per-view, but I'll make an extra nearly $2 million. $1.75 million would have been the bonus. I'm just saying the narrative out there about Hulk Hogan and all that, way off base. But we just saw a one-man performance from Mick Foley. By the way, if you're curious, Eric, I know you don't give a shit, but Kane just won the world title. The guy wearing the red mask did not bleed first. Ta-da! But what a performance from Mick Foley. It's kind of a performance beyond words, is it not?
It is. It literally took my breath away. I'm glad I've never watched it before because I enjoyed the hell out of this. Maybe more so now because I can look back at it and know that everybody came out reasonably healthy to the extent that they're still with us and everybody's still walking. I don't know if I would have felt that good about it, if I'd have seen it live or a week or two later because it was just too intense for me, to be honest. I mean, I probably would have watched it, everybody else, but it was pretty intense and maybe for me even too intense.
Next week, we're going to be doing something that, had to happen eventually. It's going to be pretty intense. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to tackle a tough subject next week when we do a profile piece on Chris Benoit. And if you have a question about Chris Benoit, we would love to hear it. The best place to ask it is over on our YouTube at 83weeks.com. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. We're going to be looking for your Chris Benoit questions there. Be sure to find the community tab as well. And we'll tackle all things Chris Benoit next week. The good, the bad, and the ugly right here at 83weeks.com. But that is next Friday. This Sunday, we're going to be live right after AEW completes the Forbidden Door. It's totally free, and we'll hope you'll join us at 83weeks.com. That'll be your question to ask Eric questions and get his take on the pay-per-view. We may have a correspondent who's going to be in town anyway covering the pay-per-view who can tell us what folks in the live house thought. I think they've got less than 1,000 tickets available, so this is going to be a near sellout for them based on what they originally are setting the pay-per-view up for. So 10,000 folks or so in the building to watch Forbidden Door this weekend. Make plans to join us immediately after late Sunday night at 83weeks.com. Next week, man, Chris Benoit. Is it just me or does it feel like we've been all over the place lately? With this Who Killed WCW series, you're posting a lot of top fives over at 83weeks.com. We're doing live Q&As. We just watched an old match that you'd never seen before, one of the most famous spectacles in all of wrestling history. Next week, Chris Benoit. But before that, recapping an AEW pay-per-view. We're doing covering a lot of ground these days, Eric.
And I'm having fun doing it. And I'm grateful to you and Dave Silva, Super Dave, and everybody else that's got their fingerprints on this because it's a team, no doubt about it. I know that sounds campy and corny, but I'm really, really grateful because I have fun doing this. And like I told you when we first started doing the podcast, right after I asked you, what are we going to do after the 84th week? 6 years ago now, 300 weeks ago. But I'm still having so much fun doing this. My week would be weird if I didn't have this to look and connect with you and everybody else. So thank you to everybody listening behind the scenes.
Well, no, thank you guys. We appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and telling your friends about your favorite podcast and letting them know that it's a Friday show now. Join us each and every Friday at 83weeks.com. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell, and we'll see you this Sunday night, right after Forbidden Door at 83weeks.com. Your house is probably worth more than ever right now, but if you could change one thing about your house, what would it be? Would you put in a new kitchen? Maybe some new hardwood floors? You can do all of that with no money out of pocket at SaveWithConrad.com. Use your equity to make your house worth even more. You might even be able to get a lower payment too. A better house with a lower payment without moving? Sign me up for that. NMLS number 32416, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com.